did God create the universe?
We're just going to rock and roll. We're going to get straight into it.
Let's just do it.
Alrighty. Cool. So, God created the universe freely with wisdom and love. The world is not the result of any necessity, nor of blind fate, nor of chance. God created out of nothing, or ex nihilo, a world which is ordered and good, and which he infinitely transcends. God preserves his creation in being and sustains it, giving it the capacity to act and leading it toward its fulfillment through his Son and the Holy Spirit.
There's a lot in there.
You say that a lot. That's going to be like when we later have T-shirts.
There's a lot in there.
Your catchphrase is going to be, there's a lot in there.
I'd like that to be on Budgie Smugglers personally. You know what I'm saying? Because of my back. Expansive genital. Freely, so no one forced him to do it?
No one forced him to do it. He didn't have to do it, but he wanted to do it with wisdom and love.
Why do we say he for God instead of they?
Yeah, you're very picky on this point, aren't you?
The Trinity?
Very inclusive.
Well, it's that. I'm not saying they as in a gender diverse they, but Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is three persons.
Yeah, but we're talking about the action of the Father being the creator. It was sort of what we referred to last week. And Father, until about 4 years ago, was generally considered to be a sort of male construct.
Are we pushing for... Is there a movement for Mama God within the Catholic Church?
I mean, not within the Catholic Church, but yeah, there's wacky sort of theologians out there who sort of say we should call God Mother or I mean, look, man, I have seen some crazy stuff, like a depiction of the crucifix with a woman on it.
I saw that. I saw the Christa. People get so upset about the Christa. Sometimes the Christ is very feminine on the cross, but never fully a woman.
He was fully a man, James. He was fully a man.
By his own time. We're retroactively making people trans now. I don't know if you're aware of this, the creator of Little Women. We don't have to go there. So out of nothing, which seems, I get that we're talking about, if we're, prime mover is the word people use, but
So it's a philosophical point that's sort of being made there. So, ex nihilo comes from, like, the Bible, right?
Yeah.
It creates out of nothing. But, like, this is metaphysically an interesting thing. This is, like, in terms of, so, for example, it was a Jesuit priest who first proposed the idea of the Big Bang theory.
Sure.
And this was considered Catholic dogma masquerading as scientific theory when it was first proposed.
I think you could say that about a lot of greasy Jesuit ideas.
Because it was considered, like, the Big Bang is like,
you know what?
There's nothing and there's
the
something.
Jesuits flip it around now, and it's scientific ideas masquerading as Catholic dogma. How do you like that, Jesuits?
I love the Jesuits, I'll just say. But,
all right. Someone should.
So he creates out of nothing an ordered and good world which he infinitely transcends. And that's important to say as well, is that the world has order. There's a reason behind it. God is reasonable. He's rationality itself. And so the world is intelligible. Right? Like, why is there something rather than nothing? Well, because God made it. But why can we understand that something? It's because God has ordered it and created it good. It's important. You're looking at me like...
Well, I know we get to the problem of evil...
We do.
Soon.
We do, very soon.
But that screams out for a discussion of the problem of evil.
Well, that's why
the
problem of evil comes...
I'll wait. Should we move...
I think we should move.
All right.
Yeah.
What is divine providence?
Right. So divine providence consists in the dispositions with which God leads his creatures towards their ultimate end. God is the sovereign master of his own plan. To carry it out, however, he also makes use of the cooperation of his creatures. For God grants his creatures the dignity of acting on their own and of being causes for each other. And I think we should do the next question before we discuss this.
All right. But that does make me think about parasites, tapeworms using other people.
Yep.
Not other people, using people. I don't know that tapeworms qualifies persons. How do we collaborate with divine providence?
So while respecting our freedom, God asks us to cooperate with him and gives us the ability to do so through actions, prayers, and sufferings, thus awakening in us the desire to will and to work for his good pleasure.
So now we can talk about those two?
No, I think we should talk about divine providence here. So, essentially, I think we're good. I didn't just unplug my microphone. So divine providence, which is essentially the force with which God rules the universe, right, is how we describe it.
Okay. God's plan.
God's plan, right? But so everything's in divine providence. So he calls all creatures, specifically human beings, towards their good.
Joseph Fritzl, raping his family in a dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
Making new members of that family, raping them too.
Sure.
Divine providence?
No, because clearly Joseph Fritzl was not responding to the promptings of divine providence.
But it was God's plan that a monster like Joseph Fritzl should have the free will to carry out those terrible sexual crimes.
Yeah, I mean, essentially it is, because I think if you think about it this way, and people find this challenging because it's obviously awful to put it in such terms, but it would be more a violation of your freedom for God to, like, prevent you from doing that than you doing it. Right? Like to
it's more of a violation of freedom of the man pushing the button on Nagasaki, but it's not an imposition on the freedom of the children of Nagasaki. Do you know what I mean? Like, he could protect people.
Yeah, he could, but I mean, so like if you're looking at it in the sense of like the sufferings of this world are the worst things that can happen to you. That's a materialist view of the universe.
Yes,
right?
it is. Yeah.
But we don't have a materialist view of the universe. We have an immaterial view of the universe, essentially.
I don't think that's the declension. Immaterial view of the universe?
Well, we believe in an immaterial world as well, right? Like
a world that transcends the material.
Yeah.
But if you say it's immaterial, that's like, I don't care about that.
Right.
It's immaterial.
No, yeah, I didn't mean it like that. Yeah.
That's what I meant.
No. So as in, like, we believe that there are things greater than the material universe.
And thus worse than the material universe.
It can be, but can be better as well.
Okay.
Right? So it's like, okay, so it would be one... So, for example, you got kids.
Okay.
Right?
I do have kids, yeah.
Yeah. And when you're with your children and they're about, like, your daughter's about to smack your son, right? Like, of course, you can stop it. And it's good for you to stop it because your daughter shouldn't go around smacking your son.
I don't stop it. Go on.
Right.
Oh, no, okay.
Yeah, but there's also... Like, so your daughter's about to do something stupid and maybe it's not going to hurt anybody else other than herself. Right?
Yes.
Like, you can intervene and a lot of the times it's good for you to intervene. But sometimes it's also good to not, right? To let her make the mistake.
She's got to learn.
She's got to learn, right? Like she has to use her freedom to do that, right? And you want to encourage that freedom. You want to say, okay, you have to take responsibility for your actions. Now, the Joseph Fritzl thing is like the most extreme end of this. Because, of course...
I want you to learn, Joseph. These rapes won't bring you happiness in the end.
And I'm sure they did it. They certainly didn't bring anybody else any happiness. But yeah, I mean, God would not for God to violate the free will of a person, of any person, right? Would be to undo everything that every other person has ever suffered, right? Like if he were to intervene in that situation, because that's the most horrible one.
Yeah.
Then you could always go, well, what's this? What's this? What's this? You know. So it's like, well, God can either create a world of automatons, which he controls through programming, or he can create a free world, which he has done, and call them to the good because he wants them to be good and give them revelation in order to guide their way.
But we also believe that God does sometimes step in and do, there are miracles.
There are miracles.
There's an interventionist God.
Often those miracles aren't, right, like, God doesn't stop the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
No, but sometimes there's a storm and Christ says, let's not have any of this. And
Right, but even in the Gospels, whenever Christ is performing those sorts of miracles, he's always sort of doing it for a greater reason, right? Like to point towards who he is.
Yes.
And in order to encourage people to sort of like recognize that.
Well, and then the central thing is that he could save himself from dying on the cross, and he doesn't.
And he doesn't, because he comes to share in our sufferings. The point of like the mystery of Christ is not that like suffering goes away, but that suffering is not meaningless. And we'll get obviously to that later on. But yeah, I mean, I think that like this is a very important point.
I think
like
that's
the plan of divine providence.
Yes.
So like God has a plan, but we can screw it up, right? Like because we can be willful, we can be stubborn, we can not want to do it, all that sort of stuff. And there are any number of examples you can think of that. But the important thing is
it's
that God...
so comforting to think that there is suffering and that God has a plan.
Yeah.
Like it's the best folky wisdom. Whenever, when there's a movie and a southerner's like, God's got a plan for you, it does actually feel good when people say that.
Well, I mean, if you look at your own life as somebody who's like found Christianity, like later on, You could think, oh, I made this dumb decision. I slept with this person. I did these drugs or whatever, right? Like, I made all these terrible mistakes, which God could have stopped. Why didn't he stop them? But also those things led you to him, right? Like in him allowing you to make those mistakes, you learnt to not make them anymore. And you may have hurt people along the way, which is why you have to make like restitution for...
It's a lot of second person here for what I think should probably be a first person narrative.
I'm absolutely happy to own that about myself. Yeah.
I'm happy with that view of divine providence.
So God respects our freedom, right? And that's like such an important point. And the other thing is like we're supposed to imitate God, right? He respects our freedom. We have to respect each other's.
Why would he want us to be free? Why wouldn't he just want us to be happy? Is freedom a necessary component of happiness?
I mean...
No one's happier than a heroin addict lying on the floor, filling up his blood with all the nice feelings.
Yeah, I mean...
Happy is the wrong word. Joyful?
And that person is absolutely not free in the Christian
idea
of the term.
Very unfree.
He's a slave. And so, no, I don't think in the Christian conception that person could be happy because he's a slave. And slaves can't be happy.
So that happiness must be freely chosen.
Mm-hmm. It's the cross, right? Like Christ freely chooses the cross. Like it's Socrates drinking the hemlock, right? Like never is a man freer than to do what he did. You know, like he's like, no, I have stood for my principles and I understand them, and I would drink this hemlock because like that's what it means to be a person of integrity.
We're opposed to euthanasia, though, aren't we?
And assisted suicide, yeah. But you have to admire pagans, right? Like for virtues and...
Sure, during the Roman Civil Wars, it's very impressive that they're always killing themselves. Like, it's wrong, but you go, man, they all do it.
Well, and also, you think of the Japanese during the Second World War, and you sort of go...
That little boy flew a plane into a battleship. That's a lot of things, but cowardly ain't one of them.
Well, exactly, right? Like, they have a different conception, right? You have to sort of step back and go, that's not my conception of heroism, but... like within their framework, which I think is limited because it doesn't have these things, it does meet certain criteria of like virtue. It's not virtuous, but it's like it's a type of virtuous action.
Can I tell you what my fringe show is this year?
Please do.
All right, this is slight. I'm only doing one show, and I'm only doing it one time in front of 600 people. If I can sell that many tickets.
Yeah.
So the show is about reading a lot about the Japanese emperor and becoming a Japanese nationalist. Like, who's in favour of kamikaze bombings and wanting to kill myself so that I can restore the empire.
Right, yeah.
Mishima style?
Yeah.
I don't know how it's going to go.
Well, I'm going to go see it, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
I look forward to, like, walking off stage with a sword and then having a big cascade of blood coming out from side of stage and then reappearing on stage as a ghost and then having the Japanese emperor go to me, not what I wanted for you.
James, I want to congratulate you on that being your first plug for yourself on this show.
Not the last. As divine providence, that I should do that. If God is omnipotent and provident, then why does evil exist?
Right, so I think we should do the next two questions together.
Let's do it.
So to this question, as painful and mysterious as it is, only the whole of the Christian faith can constitute a response. God is not in any way, directly or indirectly, the cause of evil. He illuminates the mystery of evil in his Son, Jesus Christ, who died and rose in order to vanquish that great moral evil, which is human sin, which is at the root of all other sins.
Why does God permit evil?
Faith gives us the certainty that God would not permit evil if he did not cause a good to come from that very evil. This was realized in a wondrous way by God in the death and resurrection of Christ. In fact, from the greatest of all moral evils, the murder of his Son, he has brought forth the greatest of all goods, the glorification of Christ and our redemption. So... yeah, I mean, this is like the rubber hitting the road. This is the hard stuff of Christian thought, which is, why does evil exist? Well, on faith, we believe that, and to get technical, so God doesn't cause evil, right? Because God is good.
It seems obvious that indirectly he does cause evil. And we're saying here that that is not the case.
Well, it's only if it depends on how you define it. And in the Christian tradition, you would define evil as an absence of good, right?
Right.
So...
but God creates free will.
Yes.
He creates a tree that lets evil enter into the world.
Right.
Then he puts them in a garden
where
they can reach up and eat from the tree.
Because they have freedom.
Yeah, but if I take my daughter
Yeah.
to make it a child, I mean, yeah, if I leave a sharp knife out within reach,
Yeah.
I've indirectly caused a stabbing.
Yeah, I think we've already covered the Garden of Eden
But it's the
situation.
word that indirect, right? Like that God does not directly or indirectly. I want the exact wording. Cause evil.
Yes.
He's permitting evil to happen.
He permits, but he does not will. Right? So like God has allowed evil to enter into the world through human sin, right? So the other thing is, as Christians, we believe that evil only exists because of human sin. Right? Like evil only exists in the world because
including evil in the natural world.
Yeah,
earthquakes, tsunami.
All that stuff only exists. So we have made all of creation fall through our sin because all of creation was made for us. And so through our willfulness and stubbornness and pride, we have caused all of creation to fall, which is why you can have like natural disasters, which is why we can sort of like loot and plunder the earth. These things are not the natural way of, this is not what God had in mind for creation. But he permits it to happen because he respects our freedom.
But we're saying he was shocked when we ate the apple and that came into the world?
People get hung up on the Genesis story, and I think it's the wrong thing to be hung up on because you only have to look at your own life, right? Like to know that you're an idiot, right? Like the fall is an evident fact.
But what does that tell us about God? Like, I'll grant that I feel it fairly obvious that I can't live up to my ideals.
Yeah.
There are things that I would like to do with the will and the body won't comply. There's a painful disconnect between those two things.
I do what I ought not do. Yeah.
With great frequency. Too much.
Yeah. So I think what's telling here is
that tells us that God allows that to happen. I mean, is it cause that he's not the genesis of that? Like, what is the...
Yeah, so cause is a technical word.
It is a technical
word.
So
there's a bit of technical stuff going in here. So in the Christian thought, evil is an absence of good and not a positive thing in itself, right? It's not like we don't believe in a dualism where evil is a positive force, like contending with good. Evil is the absence of good, right? So like...
What's the name for that? Well, there's evil in the world and it's fighting.
Oh, like,
good?
well, Manichaeism.
I was going to say Manichaeism.
Yeah. So that's what St. Augustine was into before he became a Christian. And there are sort of like Christian heresies that go along these lines. And it's it's always a tempting heresy, basically, because you can sort of very easily fall into the trap of the idea of like evil's a positive force. But we say evil is not a positive force, it's a negative force. It's a lack of something. So what did Adam and Eve lack, right? It's not that they were positively evil. They just lacked the trust in God, right?
Satan is an adversary and an accuser.
Yeah.
Like there is someone called Satan.
Yeah.
We believe in Satan.
We believe in
and Satan is not just
well, it's funny. So
lacking in God.
Quite quickly we do get to the angels, but
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Oh, we're getting to Satan soon?
Very soon, but I think we should. Let's keep going. Yeah.
Well, God has an adversary.
Mm-hmm. No, God doesn't have an adversary. We do.
Okay.
Satan is not God's adversary. He's ours.
Saint Michael's adversary.
Well, yeah, Saint Michael kicks his ass, baby. Boom.
Cameraman Sam's doing this. Yes.
But yeah, so it's
Satan has a domain, right? It's hell, and he's contending with God for our soul.
Right. So I mean, what I quite like is the image of Satan in hell in Dante,
where he's unhappy.
Not only is he unhappy, he's completely isolated. He's cold. He's completely introverted. Like Dante and Virgil get there, and Satan doesn't even recognize. He doesn't even look at them. Right? Like they're standing right in front of him.
He's too prideful,
and it's isolated and it's cold. Everything's covered in ice because it's like he's so selfish. He lacks so much goodness. Right? Like he's completely within himself. So and I think it's a great image of what evil is, right? Like evil is not like some sort of malicious force. It's the lack of a good force, right? Like it's complete selfishness.
I mean, evil can be done for non-selfish reasons, we wouldn't say? That not every
We'll get to that
evil
when we
act
talk
is,
about moral
is
acts.
prideful.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll get to that when we talk about moral acts. But I think in this general broad sense, what I think is important now to focus on is like, so for example, right, so like you used the example of rape earlier, and I mean it's an awful example, and maybe there are people out there who
Do you want to use a different one?
will listen. Well, I don't know.
All right,
We brought
no,
it up now, and it's the elephant in the room. I am not.
Imagine getting raped by an elephant. Wouldn't that be most displeasing indeed?
Yeah. Look,
Go on, come on.
touchy subject.
All right,
Obviously,
very touchy.
What is it a lack of?
Too much touching. I apologise.
It's a lack of the respect for somebody else's dignity.
Yes.
For their integrity, for their freedom.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's lacking in all these things. Like it's not some like this person has some positive idea of like on any respect. You sort of look at any like evil action of like mass murder or anything, or the Nazis, all sort of stuff. It's like they lack in things that we think are obvious, right? When people look back now,
It's not enough love, not enough compassion.
these people didn't have science, these people didn't have an understanding of the modern human person, all this sort of stuff. Like they lack in these qualities. That's what evil is. It's the deficiency of the good.
I'm happy with that. But why would God allow, like God is obviously allowing for there to be, for us to choose something that's not good.
Right, so I think that is more in the realm of like divine providence, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, so why is he doing it? He's doing it to respect our freedom. But so if God is an omnipotent and provident, then why does he allow evil? And the answer is only the whole of the Christian faith can constitute a response. So what we're saying here is it's not enough to sort of like think of only God the Father in isolation of everything else.
And continues to be a frustrating answer for a lot of this catechism.
Well,
which is like, just take a step back, have a look at it.
Because it's this, man. It's the cross, right? Like that's the answer, right? Like the answer is God suffers and dies to be with us in it. Like he doesn't rid us of suffering. He doesn't say, oh, well, evil's this big problem I've got to solve. He takes the problem of evil on himself and carries it until death, right? That's Christianity. That's the only response that we've got. And it's like, as responses go, it's a pretty bloody good one.
Well, I certainly prefer it to this Buddhist thing of don't worry about it, you don't have to suffer at all. Remove yourself from suffering.
Well, yeah,
we
make your mind
try and
so
make
small
there is
that-
suffering.
yeah,
we have
exactly.
to make meaning of it.
Yeah.
Look, I'm happy with it. I'm happy with that as an answer. I mean, it's hard, but you talk to people who've really suffered,
Sure.
right? And like some people who have suffered much more than me, have a much stronger and better faith than me, and some people who have suffered more than me don't.
Yeah.
And they'll say, "Listen, this happened to me. My dad took a bottle to my dog when I was a child, cut him up real bad. I saw that. He set fire to my fourth grade teacher."
Sure.
Like just people with real horror stories who really don't believe
Yeah.
that God could exist in such a terrible
Yeah, sure.
world.
Yeah.
Now, personally, I don't feel that. Not because nothing bad has ever happened to me.
Yeah.
I just have sort of a cheery disposition where this.
I don't, so... yeah.
Well, maybe there's something that we should flip sides as we discuss this. I don't. I never really. Yeah, it all just seems like suffering is not really that important.
So the next question...
And let
now,
me
which-
rephrase that. That suffering is not like an existential threat to belief in a good God.
So faith gives us the certainty that God would not permit evil if he did not cause a good to come from that very evil. And that is the thing that's very challenging. You can get all sorts of trite answers to that, right? Like, the classic one is like, oh, you break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend and all your friends sort of say to you, oh, it happened for a reason.
Plenty of fish in the sea.
Yeah, exactly, all that sort of stuff. And and that sucks when people say it to you in the moment because you're like, I don't want to fucking hear that.
Yes.
But later you always sort of go, like I can learn from these things. Like this was a bad experience, and I can actually draw some stuff from it. If you're sort of like a positive, well-adjusted person. The other thing is like the example that I like to use is the Lord of the Rings, right? And maybe not everyone's familiar with the Lord of the Rings, but at the very end of Lord of the Rings,
I think it's the least esoteric reference you've ever made on this program.
Great, that's awesome. Yeah, so Frodo and Sam get to Mount Doom, right? Like they're there to destroy the ring. Like that's their whole mission, and they've suffered so much to get there, and so have all their friends, and people have died. It's been this whole horrible ordeal. They've got like golems like following them, and this whole thing. So they get to the edge of the lava, and Frodo's like, "I'm not doing it." Spoiler alert. Sorry if that spoiled it for anyone. He's like, "I'm not going to do it." Like, and he puts the ring on, and he's like, "I'm going to be the Lord of the Rings now." And it's like, what the fuck? Like, that's like at the final hurdle, he fails.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the real tragedy of that. So Tolkien is doing this very on purpose because he calls this the eucatastrophe, right? Which is he's building his story along the lines of the cross.
That's funny.
Yeah, because it's a euphoric catastrophe. Because from this failing comes a good.
I thought it was like the Eucharist catastrophe.
Well, I mean, essentially it is, right?
Yeah,
But yeah,
because instead of Christ,
Yeah.
it's not that Eucharist is.
And so then Gollum bites the ring off Frodo's finger and falls into Mount Doom, thus destroying the ring and ending Sauron's evil reign, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a euphoric catastrophe because it couldn't have happened except for this way, even though it meant a great deal of suffering for the people who were involved. In the same way, the cross is the same thing, right? Like the apostles and Mary, the Mother of God, are there at the foot of the cross. Christ has been crucified and he's died, and it all looks, the temple rents, and it's just like darkness for 3 days. And it's like, this is the worst thing that could possibly have ever happened. And it's only through that, because of it, that you can get salvation, right? Like, and that's the sort of like structure of life in the Christian idea, right? Like, terrible, tragic things happen to you, and it's awful. Like, you get cancer, and this happened to a good friend of ours, right? Get cancer, and it's terrible. And she died, and that's very sad. But through that experience, she became a saint.
Yeah, there's a good argument to be made. I mean, she hasn't been canonized.
She was going to get there without the cancer.
She hasn't been canonized, and
well, I mean, I think she was quite saintly by the end, and it was a very like moving thing to watch.
It's hard, and it's especially hard because no one has suffered everybody's suffering, which is then what is nice about Christ and in the garden and taking everyone's sins onto himself and becoming sin and for all humanity. But there are limitations in the amount that you and I have suffered.
Sure.
And that have even known people to suffer. And so sometimes it feels phony to me to be able to say something, for me to be able to say to someone, like if a fucking kid had cancer or something, God forbid.
Sure.
Like, I'm thinking of the worst thing I can think of, being like,
don't worry.
This is for some bigger. Some big's coming to this, don't you worry about that.
Yeah.
Which is what, first of all, I think that person probably does need to hear.
Yeah.
But to say that with authority is really hard.
Yeah.
Which is part of the nice thing about we don't have to speak with authority. We just channel the message of someone who did have authority, who's God. But it's a hard thing to bear witness to, and it's why it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Do you know Cameron Fradd?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Seriously sick lady.
Shout out to the Frads.
Shout out to the Frads.
Yeah.
When she says, with all the stuff that she goes through and lives through, you have to offer that up to God, and here's what that means, and here's why you have to live through suffering. It's so powerful, and it's helped so many. It's helped my wife.
Yeah.
So many women I know, when she says that, like, there's meaning to this suffering, offer it up. It's beautiful. When I say that to my wife, shut up, Jack! It feels ridiculous. It feels like a ridiculous thing to say. So to have the witness of people who who have experienced incredible suffering, to be able to, and it feels very powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and it's so easy to like. Yeah, I mean that's why I was a bit hesitant to sort of like deal with specific things, because it's such an easy theory, and the living of it is like the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
But that's like the one thing you can count on basically is that you're going to suffer and die. That's the guarantee, right? Like death and taxes. So
and I'm not paying my taxes. No, I do. But this is also why Christianity, I think, can feel at the worst telling of the message. It feels.
I don't think I did a bad job of it there, but yeah.
You did great, hey? You did great. But I'm thinking of like youth pastors who come and talk to you when you're in year 7, and it feels super gay, like in a way that Islam never feels gay. Right? When the Muslims like, God is strong and God is all powerful and we will create a nation. We are strong. Or where Jews are like, we're very exacting about the law. We're doing it right.
Yeah.
Or the Buddhists are like, I'm just detaching. It's fine. But when some guy comes to your school and he's like, hey, he's suffered and died for you. And you're like, what do you know of suffering, loser? You weak, soft, nothing of a person. Like that is a unique experience of Christians evangelizing and it being gross, right?
Yeah,
is that unfair?
I mean, I was never particularly moved by those things. Yeah, and I think in
I remember hating it.
Well,
when I was a kid,
but like in the
they would come to the school.
but I
I hated them.
Protestants, man. Like in the
I'm not just they're Catholic, they're loser Catholic priests.
Look, yeah, there are. But I mean, the other thing about like what's beautiful about the Catholic priesthood, I think, is that you've got a ideally celibate man, who, like is there on at the drop of a hat.
He may not be doing it right, but he's called upon to suffer.
Yeah, even if he's living imperfectly,
yeah,
he's trying, hopefully, right? And it's like, okay, he's a man who has willingly taken on suffering, right? Like for you to do this thing for you, which is bring you the sacraments, bring you God, and it's like, all right, it's hard to look that man in the eye and say like, you don't know what I'm going through, because he probably doesn't know what specifically you're going through.
I know, but I love that men are so horny that's the equivalent. It's like, like, yes, you can look someone with cancer in the eye and go, listen, I don't get any pussy.
It's not just.
I understand where you're coming from.
Man. It's
no, but that's a
children.
That's a big one. That's a big. Yeah, it's nice to have children too.
Yeah, you have a family. You go home and there's somebody at home who might have made you dinner or might be yelling at you. Your life could be very difficult when you're married.
Yeah,
but like,
it's never lonely.
It's never lonely, right? Like you don't.
I'll rephrase that. It's never quiet.
Yeah, well, I think you could be very lonely in a marriage for sure. We should. I think we've covered that.
How long have we done?
Well, we're going to cover it. 30? Yeah, we can keep going.
All right.
Yeah. Heaven and earth.
We have to heaven and earth. So what did God create?
Sacred Scripture says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The church, in her profession of faith, proclaims that God is the creator of everything, visible and invisible, of all spiritual and corporeal beings, that is, of angels and of the visible world, and in a special way of man. I think we should just plug on there.
You want to play on? All right. Who are the angels?
The angels are purely spiritual creatures, incorporeal, invisible, immortal, and personal beings endowed with intelligence and will. They ceaselessly contemplate God face to face, and they glorify him. They serve him and are his messengers in the accomplishment of his saving mission to all.
One more. In what way are the angels present in the life of the church?
The church joins with the angels in adoring God, invokes their assistance, and commemorates her in some liturgies.
Right. When those angels turned up to Lot, did you not immediately go there when you heard this description?
I was thinking of like
they wanted to fuck them. They said, "Bring them out here. We're going to have sex with those angels."
I think Scott Hahn called that a particularly acute form of inhospitality, which I thought was very funny.
He's a funny man, sagacious.
What was the question?
Well, if angels don't have, gosh, I saw a fun. I think it's the Adam Friedland show with the Stuff Island boys today. Okay. They were talking about Michael Jackson, and they're talking about Michael Jackson's genitals. And one says Michael Jackson was like the angels. He was smooth. All angels are smooth. So that angels do not have do not have atoms. They're not corporeal entities.
No, so they're not physical, right? So they're incorporeal.
They listen to that song by what's her name? Olivia Newton-John, and they just go, "Not for me. I won't be getting physical." Greatest joke of all time. Yeah, like how could they? Like obviously Lot wanted to. Thank you, Sam. Obviously, the people outside Lot's door wanted to have sex with those angels, and that's why Lot tried to give him his daughters. But what was there to have sex with?
Yeah. So I mean, well, what does it mean when an angel appears to Mary, right? Or the angels appear to the shepherds, right? Like it. And in the Old Testament, angels are sort of described as like quite scary. Like big rings and lots of eyes.
Lots of eyes, lots of wings, lots of good stuff.
All that sort of stuff.
A wheel within a wheel way in the middle of the air.
Yeah. So essentially, like we depict angels in whatever way we can because it's like, little cherubic children.
I want it to be boys.
Yeah.
Have you seen that sketch?
Yeah, Kieran showed it to me.
Was that not funny?
It was very funny. I watched it a number of times.
I've watched it. I've tried to reach out to the guy.
We should put that if we have show notes.
Can we load that up?
Well, Your Holiness, thank you so much for bringing me on board.
Michelangelo, it's a pleasure to have you here.
I mean, this job, the Sistine Chapel, it's...
Big job, big place, big job.
Well, look, I've got a few ideas that I've been working on, but I'd love to know what you've been thinking about.
Yeah, I was thinking, what's the thing that encapsulates the Bible and everything we do here the most? What do you think? Angels, right? That's
Angels,
it. That's in one word.
Well, I've read the book.
You read the book. That's good.
So we're thinking hundreds of eyes. They've got the wings. They've got a wheel.
Yeah, well, this is all that wheel stuff, all the wings and the be not afraid stuff. That's pretty played out.
Right.
So I was thinking, maybe this time, why don't we make them a lot of young boys?
You want them to be young boys on the
Yeah, I was thinking maybe this time we make them a lot of young boys. What about that?
Yeah, so, I've not imagined them as humans, so what do you think they'll be wearing? Or
Mikey, they're not wearing nothing. They're not wearing nothing in this one, Mikey.
So it's just like a leaf covering? No. Right,
Mikey. They're not wearing nothing.
They're not wearing nothing, Mikey. Have I not shown you? That's the funniest guy. It's so funny.
It's very funny.
So that angels are weird, spooky, non-corporeal entities.
Yes.
But how can we see them? What light is refracting off them?
So they're purely spiritual creatures, and they do the will of God, essentially. So normally angels in the Bible are messengers. So they're telling somebody about the will of God.
Because to actually see God face to face would kill you.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that...
Like on the mountain.
Sorry?
Like on the mountain when they try to see God.
Yeah.
He's like, turn away. You know
Yeah. It's Moses, yeah. So, but like angels have a different relationship. So they have... We would say that they have a will and an intellect, right? Like, but what they don't have is essentially the same type of freedom that we do.
They're more like robots.
Well, because they're eternal, right? They're like all angels are created essentially
Immortal.
Yeah.
Eternal. More than eternal? Like they're just
eternal.
outside of time.
They're outside
with
of
God.
time.
Right.
So they get one choice, which is to do God's will or not.
Is this in here? Because I remember hearing about this, that like at the moment of their creation, they get a choice. Is this in the Catechism? Or is this extra, is the deeper Catechism?
I think this is more sort of theological speculation.
Okay, that like pre-time, angels, as they are brought into being, have a choice to either comply with or not to comply with God's will. But they do have a choice.
They do have a choice.
But it's a fixed choice because they don't have a life.
Well, because they're eternal, right?
Yeah.
Because like the choice they make once is the choice they make forever, and they keep making it. Whereas we get to exist in time and fuck up and make a different choice. But angels don't really get that.
So Satan is fixed,
right,
eternally
but also,
making his choice.
Exactly. But they also have something else, which is they get the immediacy of knowing what their choice is, whereas we don't, right? Like we have a sort of darkened will and intellect. They have a fully enlightened will and intellect.
But they're not. They're omnipotent?
No, they're not.
So they're they know everything? They see God face to face?
Yeah, I mean,
God's created them to know some things about himself, but not others, presumably?
Look, I probably should have brushed up on my angelology before we addressed this, and I didn't.
Okay.
But yeah, so this is essentially why we say like Satan fell, right? Which is that like he made his choice, which was to, and
And a bunch of other angels made a choice with him.
Yeah, I mean, I love Paradise Lost. I know a lot of
Never
people
read
don't.
it.
Really?
Never.
Oh, it's so good. I would rather reign in hell than serve in heaven, says Satan in like the first book. And it's like...
Yeah, it's a cruel warping of what Caesar says when he's going through...
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Gaul?
I think so, yeah. But yeah, so they get that one fixed choice, whereas we don't. But we do... I mean, that might be more speculation.
Okay.
But in terms of what we have to believe, it's that angels are real, essentially, and they're not...
And they don't have bodies.
They don't have bodies.
But they look like stuff.
So they can appear to us in mysterious ways and assumably in recognizable ways. And you think for example, like the Blessed Virgin Mary appears to people.
She's got a body though.
Yeah, she's got a body. It's in heaven. But an angel would assumably, right, like if they're communicating to you
She
somehow,
was assumedly.
Yeah, that's right. They're communicating to you somehow, so they use language, right? Like they're probably using the language that you speak. So why wouldn't they look to you like someone that's familiar to you, you know?
What? But people seem to be afraid when they see them. Right? Like the angel seems to open with like, hey, chill, relax. But couldn't they just assume like a friendly, jolly form?
Well, we saw, what was the movie we saw just before
It's a Wonderful Life. And when
Wonderful
Clarence appears, the guy's terrified.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. But he also looks like a normal dude, you know?
But we don't back...
It's a Wonderful Life. Great movie.
Great movie.
Encourage everybody to watch it. Great.
It Happened One Night, also a great movie. Frank Capra, so many good movies. Lost Horizon, didn't care for it. Other ones, excellent. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, can't say enough good things. But what I'd like to get at now is that the angelology of It's a Wonderful Life we don't hold to. We don't believe that people become angels.
No.
Okay.
No, you're a human, so you have a human soul.
And that angels have...
Angelic souls.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, I think we should just move on because it's a bit...
I'd like to take a break. Are you sure?
Wait,
it's hot.
Yeah. We should do the last couple of
All right,
questions.
power through.
And then...
What does sacred scripture teach about... I'll read the line. Beside each believer stands an angel as a protector and shepherd, leading him to life. Is that true?
Yeah, we believe in like guardian angels and stuff, so...
All right.
Yeah.
Is there an infinite number of angels?
I mean, essentially, yes.
Like more than we could count?
We talk about them as the hosts of heaven,
Okay.
right? Like, there are hosts of them. There's a lot.
What does that mean, host?
Like a big...
Like they're welcoming you in? That's what I always thought.
No, like if an army's coming to you, it's a host of
Okay.
enemies or something, you know?
What does sacred scripture teach about the creation of the visible world?
Through the account of the 6 days of creation, sacred scripture teaches us the value of the created world and its purpose, namely to praise God and to serve humanity. Every single thing owes its very existence to God, from whom it receives its goodness and perfection, its proper laws, and its proper place in the universe.
Yeah, it just seems to be saying it's
God
all
created
good.
everything.
God made everything,
Yeah.
and everything is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's meant to be. What is the place of the human person in creation?
The human person is the summit of visible creation, inasmuch as he or she is created in the image and likeness of God.
The summit of visible creation.
Yeah, so the angels are jealous of us, right? For the things that we get to do is the idea, right? Like, because...
Do the angels tell us that?
No, this is just sort of like a sort of...
Do the
pious
angels
thing.
yearn to be human?
I think that like we have something that they don't have, which is the life of Christ, which we can be baptized into.
Right.
Like angels cannot become Christians, right? They cannot enter into the life of the Trinity like we can.
They can't become God in the way that we, through Christ,
Right.
become God.
Become like God. That's right. Yeah.
Become God.
Well, yeah. Well, that was on the previous page actually. The quote that I was going to quote last week, which I was rudely cut off by.
Apologise.
The glory of God is man fully alive. More of a man's life is the vision of God. Yeah, that's actually a terrible translation. I've heard cooler translations where it's like, man alive is God. Anyways, I think we should just do these last couple of questions and finish it.
All right. What language was it in originally? Latin? Greek?
Irenaeus, probably Latin. I'm
Probably
assuming.
Latin. What kind of bond exists between created things?
There exists an interdependence and a hierarchy among creatures as willed by God. At the same time, there is also a unity and solidarity among creatures, since all have the same Creator, are loved by Him, and are ordered to His glory, respecting the laws inscribed in creation and the relations which derive from nature of things. Therefore, is a principle of wisdom and a foundation for morality.
I'm at the top of the food chain. I get to eat the turtle.
Well, I mean, yeah, we are the top of the food chain. Like, there is a hierarchy in creation. We're at the top of it. But the other thing is that there is a solidarity there, right? Like that we can't abuse creation, and that there is...
We must be kind and noble husbands.
Yeah, we should look after creation.
Animal
this is a positive thing.
husbandry.
Not the way that you meant it, but yeah, I mean, it's something that people can... Often, if you're attracted to Catholicism, you're coming to it from...
I thought you were going to say attracted to animals. Sorry.
From the right, I suppose, where sort of like...
In this day and age, sure.
Yeah, and there's a sort of like raised eyebrow about the sort of like, you know, creation stuff, right? Where it's like, oh, we should look after the earth. And people sort of go, oh, like Pope Francis wrote an encyclical a couple of years ago on like looking after creation, and people were sort of like, you know, raised eyebrows.
Don't be a homocentric view of the world. Don't be a man-centered view. Anthropocentric.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but like, there is a very long tradition in Christianity of like, no, we should, like,
We're in charge.
we're in charge, but that's not like for us to abuse and do what we want, right? There is an ordered way of doing that. We should have an ordered relationship with creation.
The world is not a collective. The world is a company that we run as
Well, no,
beneficent CEOs.
I think you're taking the piss out of me here. But
There's a hierarchy that's not abusive. I mean, this is to a certain mind and a certain way of thinking.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as a non-abusive hierarchy that all
Sure.
power
Yeah.
is to be abused.
Yeah.
And we don't really believe that.
No.
That with a father and a child, the father has the power, but the father should exercise that power in a benign way.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so too with the sow and the foal
Well, I mean, if you think about it,
and
like
the bonsai tree.
like so in like I hate to beat up on Islam here, but like so in Islam, you know what is it? You hang up the animal and you cut its throat, you let it bleed out, and that's the halal way of butchering the animal, right? Which is quite painful, and the animal suffers quite a bit.
So they say,
right? As a Christian, you would say this is actually wrong, right? Like we shouldn't needlessly cause suffering in animals, right? Like there's no problem in killing and eating animals,
no,
but there is a way that you can have a relationship with that process that isn't like immoral.
You can treat them nicely,
yeah,
before you kill and eat them.
Well, also, and you should kill them quickly and painlessly, and also, because like you're supposed to look after it, like you're a guardian for it.
Yes,
yeah,
which does not seem to be a like in the natural world. Like this is a pretty strange thing that you should kill an animal painlessly.
Yeah,
and in most human societies, people don't seem to care.
No.
Like whenever a video comes out of us like shipping cows overseas
to
some Vietnamese slaughterhouse live export, some guy with a baseball bat just getting it wrong.
Yeah.
But there is something about being not quite euthanizing the animal, but like stunning it and just killing it. Like we want it not to suffer.
We want it not to suffer.
By and large.
Yeah, but also like we shouldn't want to exploit the creation to the point that like there is no further resources, all this sort of stuff, right? Like we have to have a harmonious relationship. Like we have been given a sort of like a privilege by being the protectors of the earth, which is for our benefit, but also for the benefit of, we should look after creation while we do it. So yeah.
Wouldn't a better way to look after those animals though be to not kill them and eat them?
I think, look, we will get to sort of animals more deeply.
I was a vegetarian for many years, so I have a counter argument to that point.
I know you were. Yeah. Look, if we have T-shirts, my T-shirt will be, we'll get to that later, and yours will be the other one. Yeah.
I forget what it was, but I wanted it on budgies. And what are we up to? 64? 64?
65.
65, last one for this episode. What is the relationship between the work of creation and the work of redemption?
The work of creation culminates in the still greater work of redemption, which in fact gives rise to a new creation in which everything will recover its true meaning and fulfillment. So
cool.
In the new covenant, we should have a restored relationship with creation.
When we come back after death and everything is right and we've got our bodies.
Like, we should aspire to that now, right? Like
we want to build that heaven on earth?
Yeah. Well, we should aspire to live as well as we can, given the redemption that was won for us on the cross. Like it's not a sort of carte blanche to do whatever we want.
No, I'm with you. That we see a way to live.
Yeah.
And that we should try and live in that way.
It's not like sin boldly, right? It's not just, all right, he did it. Now you're good. Don't worry. Off you go. It's like, oh, no, it comes with responsibility.
Well, as MC Ride says, responsibility's cool, but there's more things in life, like getting your all night. I think that's a good time to end the episode. Thank you for joining us here on the Catechast. We'll be back with another episode soon.